Hey everyone, it's Alex the Real Mr. Robinson here. So, Emmy season's coming up, or I'm sorry, we're in the middle of Emmy season. The Emmy Awards are just around the corner. One of the biggest shows to get a whole ton of Emmy attention, 18 nominations to be exact, is Stranger Things, the Netflix show that debuted last year. So why am I taking a year and a half to talk about this show? Well, the reason is because that's how long it took me to actually watch this show. Ever since the show premiered on Netflix, I've heard a lot about it. I've heard my friends and coworkers talk about the show nonstop, ask me if I've seen it. I've even gotten requests on YouTube on some of my other reviews to review Stranger Things, but I just never watched it. It's not that I had any disinterest in it, because everything I've heard about it, I've wanted to watch it. I just didn't have the time. And on the few moments that I did have the time to watch it, my internet would crash. So now, with all that said and done, I finally watched it. I just finished the first season. I absolutely love this show. I'm even more pissed off that I didn't watch this earlier, because this truly is something up my alley. The show takes place in the town of Hawkins, Indiana, which is a fictional town, and the setting is in the 1980s. The plot of the first season involves Will, a young boy who suddenly disappears, and both the chief of police, his mother, his older brother, and his own friends go on a constant search to try to find Will, and this leads to a lot of bizarre and supernatural discoveries, including the appearance of a young telekinetic girl named 11, whose backstory is kinda muddled at first, but as the season goes on, we soon learn more about this character. Now, this show borrows from a lot of different kinds of fictional works and movies from the 80s. If you want the specifics, it's a blend of some Spielberg movies back then, like E.T. and Poltergeist, which he wrote and produced, because of all the elements involving the kids and how they're the main characters, while the adults are kind of incompetent in handling the situation themselves. That's not so much the case with this show, though. I'm just talking about in those Spielberg movies, the kids are the more competent ones. It's also a mix of a lot of John Carpenter works. The soundtrack is that really cool 80s synthesizer soundtrack that you hear in a lot of John Carpenter films. And the opening titles for this show feel like something you'd see from a Halloween movie. Just the way it's filmed, the way it has that little grainy film look to it, and just the overall theme overall feels very John Carpenter, and it borrows some stuff from It, and that's very ironic considering that even though the show came out first, Finn Wolfhard, who plays Mike here, would eventually go on to be in the It movie that came out last weekend. So that's a bit of irony right there, and I guess perfect timing for me to be reviewing this show. So it has a fantastic look to it. It feels like a lot of those works. It also comes across as its own thing and doesn't really feel like a ripoff of those previous works. If you compare this show to movies that have tried to do this, while I think they did succeed, like with Super 8 and It Follows, Stranger Things goes above and beyond. It is just pitch perfect. And that also might have to do with the fact that it is a TV show. So you have more time spent with these characters, you have more time to tell this large story, but I'm also glad that it's not a long season. It's only 8 episodes long, which for me personally is perfect. Sometimes with these Netflix shows, like the Marvel stuff, it's often a struggle to try to binge watch the series because they're 13 episodes apiece. It took me a long time to finish Jessica Jones, which I love, and I haven't even finished Daredevil Season 2 because it's just too much of a commitment. I haven't seen Luke Cage, I haven't seen Iron Fist, and I haven't seen The Defenders yet, so just in case you're wondering, I've not seen the last 3 Netflix Marvel shows. But 8 episodes is perfect because you just spend 8 hours to binge the whole show, and it's pretty much, you're done. It goes by pretty quickly, even though I'm not much of a binger. I'm kind of an old man when it comes to TV shows. Like, at most, I'll probably binge 2 episodes, but I usually like to watch 1 or 2 episodes, and then wait a day, and then come back for the next one. I like to keep my anticipation growing, and wait and be patient for what's about to come next. Back to the actual show itself. The 8 episodes works for its advantage. It never feels rushed, and you get to spend enough time with these characters that are all really fun to be with. The kids in the show are phenomenal. All the kid actors do a great job, you like the characters, and they're a lot of fun to be with. Probably the one child actor that everyone remembers in the show is Millie Bobby Brown, who plays 11, or Elle as she's often referred to as. She's this young psychic girl who pretty much had a lot of experiments done on her to pretty much make her Keery. We'll just say that, Keery with a shaved head, if she wasn't so crazy. But when we're first introduced to Eleven, we don't know that much about her, but as time goes on, we get to delve further into her backstory, learn a little more about her and the trouble that she went through with the evil government, which is a trope very similar to E.T., and you sympathize with her. There are a lot of characters in the show to sympathize with, and another one is Winona Ryder, who plays Will's mother. She is pretty much a single mom who's divorced, and her ex-husband couldn't give two shits about their missing son at all. And she starts to get all these weird signals that Will might be communicating with her from another dimension. But she's great in this role. The dynamic that she has with her older son is really powerful. And being the older son of two divorced parents, I can definitely relate to all of these things that are going on. I mean, outside of the missing younger brother. That thankfully has not happened to me, but it definitely feels like a very real relationship between the older son and the mother. One of the elements that I wasn't too sure about was all the stuff involving the older teenagers, because the main kids are like 12, 13, they're in middle school, but the stuff involving the teenagers, which is very much like an 80s horror movie with teenagers, I was nervous about. I was not sure if it was gonna really work all that well, because when all these scenes start out and we get to see the cool jock type guys in that group, I'm just like, oh no, this part of the show is gonna bomb hard. But things start to pick up when Will's older brother and Mike's older sister start interacting more with each other. There is a little bit of the will they or won't they relationship romance that's going on, which I'm kind of glad that they just stayed as friends. At the same time, the boyfriend for Mike's older sister is just a complete douchebag. I'll get back to that aspect a little later. But when it's just the two of them trying to solve this mystery on their own, it works. Another great character is Jim Hopper, who plays the town's chief of police, played by David Harbour. And when we first get introduced to this character, he seems like a totally scumbag piece of shit cop where he doesn't care about anything that's going on. He's kind of lazy. But as the show goes on and when he's actually on duty, you can tell that he is a hard ass. He might appear lazy at first and may appear not to care about people, but when he has to get things done, he gets things done. And his backstory is also very sympathetic, where he is also a divorced parent of a deceased daughter. So there's ultimately a lot of sympathy with these characters, and I love how the disappearance of this one kid that everyone has some sort of connection with or can relate to brings everyone together. So those are the characters. I really like a lot of them, except for the bullies. I mentioned this in my review for the It movie that just came out, but I can't stand bullies that are just borderline criminals. In my review for It, someone commented saying, oh, that's how the bullies were meant to be in the book. They were downright psychopaths. And I could get behind that if it was something in the book, because that's something that the movie ultimately can't get across. But this is an original show. I know it takes inspiration from Stephen King, and after watching the movie adaptation of It, I can clearly tell where Stranger Things got inspired from It. But the bullies, there are two sets of bullies here. There's the middle school bullies for the kids and the older jock high school bullies for Will's older brother, Jonathan, and Mike's older sister, Nancy. It just comes across as very cliched, and the middle school bullies are the worst because everyone has come to the assumption that Will is dead, and the bullies are just so cold-hearted, and they're like, yeah, we're glad your friend's dead. You have no sympathy for these bullies at all. And then when they pop back up again after Eleven freezes one of them and makes him piss his pants, they come out with switchblades. And at that point, I was like, oh shit, where did these kids get switchblades from? So I feel like the bullies are just not that well written. I wish there was a little more to them, but I don't know. Hopefully they won't return in Season 2. If Season 2 can get rid of that aspect, then I think it might end up being much better than this season here. But the bullies, it didn't work. And I should also point out that I watched and finished Stranger Things before watching the It movie. However, I'm more harsh on this show about the bullies than I am It because, as someone pointed out, the bullies were like that in the original book. Now here's one other criticism that I have with the show. The show has a beautiful look to it. Sometimes it has a very grainy 80s look to it that you wonder, was this actually shot in the 80s and it was just buried and it wasn't discovered until 2016? Because there are points where it looks like they actually filmed it to look like something that was filmed in the 80s. It's got the film grain, and the colors are very muted, something that you'd see straight out of an 80s movie of this kind of genre. And it has such a beautiful look to it that whenever the show has to use CGI, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Now, I'm not one of those guys that thinks, oh, practical effects are the way to go and fuck CGI. I do prefer practical effects, but CGI is also very helpful when necessary. And I feel like with the way the show looks, the CGI looks so out of place. Especially when you get to the show's monster, the Demogorgon. There was actually no reason for this to be CGI to begin with. I understand if it was more of a grotesque looking monster, but the way this thing is designed, it has a giant Venus flytrap mouth that splits open 4 different ways. Its body is very humanoid, so it would have been a lot more convincing if they used animatronics and a man in a suit to portray the Demogorgon. I did read that the creators of the show, the Duffer Brothers, did want to use practical effects for the Demogorgon, but they were on a time crunch, so they had to use CGI. In that sense, I can't really blame them, because if they're on a time crunch to get this out, then they kind of have to work within their limitations. But I still stand by the fact that if the Demogorgon was a man in a suit and practical effects, it would have looked a lot more convincing. So the use of CGI and it sticking out was a disappointment. The bullies was something that I really didn't care for, but overall, I love this show. I can't recommend this show enough. I'm sure most people have seen it, and I'm one of the last people to actually watch Stranger Things Season 1. But I'm glad that I'm watching it before the second season comes out, because I'm looking forward to that second season. I'm looking forward to seeing where the story goes, what the characters are up to. I'm excited. So my rating for Stranger Things, despite my complaints, they are more complaints that are just scattered around. But this show, you have to get off your ass and go see it right now. And I'm more saying that as a grade, just because it's a Netflix show and a TV show at that, so you could just kind of sit where you are right now, pop on Netflix and start binging it. I'm almost tempted to binge this show again before the second season comes out because I love it that much. The characters are great, the score is phenomenal, the look of the movie's gorgeous. It's very inventive, pays homage to all those classic 80s works from Spielberg, John Carpenter, and Stephen King, but it always comes across like it's its own thing. I absolutely love Stranger Things. If you haven't seen it yourself, just start watching it. And that's my review for Stranger Things Season 1 at long last. When Season 2 comes out, I'm going to be reviewing each individual episode through the Stardust app, so you can go find me on there, Alexander Robinson, or The Real Mr. Robinson. And then once I've watched the whole show, I'll come back on YouTube and do a full review of the second season. So I'm looking forward to it. And until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on Season 1 of Stranger Things, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is The Real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.